The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, it is time for the Bronx Buzz. This is the program on BronxNet where we talk to journalists, talk to writers, sometimes photographers and videographers about what they're reporting on, what they're covering, and get some insight from a journalist's point of view of what's going on. And actually, tonight we've got a couple of really important topics. The latest breaking news is that Amazon has turned down the opportunity to locate into Queens. And of course, BronxNet will be hosting a debate for public advocate tomorrow at the Lovinger Theater at 6 o'clock. You're invited, by the way. It's free. You can come on in and see it live. But we can talk about some of that, and got a lot of interesting things with two excellent guests. Our first one, we're going to go to Queens, New York, where we say hello to Sadef Ali Cully. Welcome back to the program. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Let's start with Amazon. You're out there in Queens, of course. Sadef, by the way, writes for City Limits, and she has a wonderful piece that we're also going to talk about eviction data, and the Bronx did not show up so nicely in that data. But I do want to start with this Amazon thing. This is a big surprise. How do you read what's gone on and what people and the politicians' reactions are going to be?
I think it's not. I think Amazon is actually not completely left New York. I think I think that's really important to clarify because Amazon still has warehouses here. They still have their one of their headquarters, not headquarters, but corporate offices here. So they're going to still exist on some level, but it just won't be a huge headquarters that they had planned for in Queens. And I think that it speaks to a lot of what's happening, how community organizations, how advocacy groups and union groups can kind of fight like the David Goliath battle in New York City. And it says a lot to how New York is, you know, is a tough city, and you have, as the mayor said, it's a tough city and you have to be tough to make it here.
To make it, and if you make it here, you can make it anywhere. We could write a song about that.
Frank Sinatra. That's right.
Well, let me ask you this. To me, before we finish this conversation, I'm going to give you another point of view. But to me, the biggest sticking point was the $3 billion tax write-off. And that people are saying, wait a minute, Amazon's maybe the biggest corporation in the world. And why are we giving them $3 billion? They should want to pay us to come to New York, and where is their investment other than the fact that they're here? We're paying Amazon $3 billion. That does not resonate well, I think, with the everyday New Yorkers and politicians who represent them.
Some of the arguments there was that they were bringing in 25,000 jobs over a span of over like 15 or 20 years into New York City, and that was important, but people didn't. The jobs weren't guaranteed. My editor-in-chief, Jared, did a great investigative piece that looked into the clause, the technological advances clause inside of Amazon's deal, which meant that, robots could eventually take over. Like, technology basically had an edge over, humans.
Well, and a financial edge because it's cheaper. Right?
Exactly. So if anyone's interested in looking at some of the deals, they should definitely go to City Limits and look up the Amazon clause. Jared did an excellent deep dive into the deal. And then the other part is that the $3 billion subsidy, well, there wasn't enough in that. And that was where the community came in, where they were starting to ask for more during the city council hearings when Corey Johnson and Councilmember Van Bremen asked about unions, they absolutely said no. They were not even
Right.
ready to negotiate. They didn't even give the facade that they were willing to negotiate with unions. They didn't even want that. And I think that comes from a lot of their background. They don't deal with unions at all in
Right.
Seattle
Well, this is the new
and
way
other
of,
cities that they're based in.
yeah, and this is also the new way of doing business. I mean, in corporate America right now, it's not favored, yet New York is a very traditional place, and there's no question that that is, kind of part of our DNA. My point of view is that the blame for this falls with the mayor and governor and the way that they tried to cut this deal, in that, they had they come to New Yorkers or to their other elected officials, and the governor talked with the state Senate, which has a new Democratic majority, and the mayor had a chance to talk to city council members, maybe they would have crafted a different deal and still been able to get Amazon. But because they handled it the way they handled it, Amazon, things didn't work. People didn't like the deal, and then we're left with this situation where they're basically, say bye bye, we're going.
I think your viewpoint is in line with many community advocacy groups, unions, and elected officials, because they were left out of it. A lot of them, told 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 folks that we don't have any say in what happens in our communities, and this is not a small project. It isn't like a three-story building coming into an area. This is going to be a global like corporation that's coming into neighborhood like Queens, and nobody had a say. And that's a lot of people felt
Yeah.
similar to the way that you felt, for sure.
Last question on it. The political fallout and the easy response, and you're going to hear it. It already has started with some of the Long Island elected officials who are not happy about losing the potential for the jobs for the region. New York City doesn't want 25,000 jobs. That's what the headlines are going to read in many places. I guess it's unavoidable, but I guess the New York political establishment stood firm.
Yeah, but we were, yeah, but those jobs we didn't know if they were guaranteed. And that's what I think the community wanted. They wanted some guarantees from Amazon, and Amazon wasn't budging there. And that was kind of the beginning of the fallout for the
Right.
deal in this across the state and the city.
You did a fantastic job in evaluating the city's eviction data that came from Corey Johnson, who was the temporary public advocate, but certainly still is the city council speaker, that showed that the Bronx had the worst eviction data. It's an expansive article. You did tremendous analysis, but maybe you could give us a point of view and what you learned out of that, and why the Bronx fared so poorly in that data.
I think that definitely what I learned from some of the interviewed first was that a lot of funding needs to go into the right to counsel law, which basically provides like legal services for people who are in the middle of an eviction. And it's actually pretty easy. You can go online to and you can go online and find out if your area is qualified for free legal services. And then from there, you can go ahead and basically when you get, or if you are in court, the court system actually sets you up with someone right there and then on the spot to figure out if they could help you and how far they could help you in your eviction case. So that's really.
Well, let me ask you this: did any of your analysis kind of underscore why the Bronx? In other words, why didn't Brooklyn have this issue, or why didn't Queens have this issue? Why were Bronx people most affected? One of the people that you quoted in the article, a good friend of ours who's been on the program a number of times, Gregory Jost, who's over there at Banana Kelly, basically said that the economics don't work. Why doesn't it work?
That's right.
Why doesn't it work badly for Brooklyn and Queens, for example?
And Jost is right on the money here. Gregory pointed out that this is a much deep-rooted problem there, and it was going to take many policies to kind of overcome the disenfranchisement that's been occurring in the Bronx for decades, and it's leading, and these are the repercussions of that disenfranchisement,
Mhm.
from low-paying jobs to being displaced, communities of color not getting the justices that they deserve, and those kind of and those kind of things just kind of lead up to situations like evictions. It was actually the eviction had actually declined. It was used to be much higher a
Mhm.
few years ago. So it's declined over the years, over the last couple of years, and stagnated. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign, but it definitely looks like the Right to Counsel Law Service is, pointing out that maybe they need more funding to help other people that are going through
Well, it's
something like
not,
an eviction.
yeah, listen, it's not only funding. I'm a media person and always interested in information and what information Bronx people have. With the right to counsel law is there, but, Bronx people don't get that information. And to me, that's this was as much that as anything else.
Right, 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 right. Right,
Sadef,
that
go ahead, finish it up because we're just about out of time. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to tell you thank you. We do appreciate your time. You really always provide us with great information. And I know you're going to go out in the streets and find out what people are saying about Amazon, and we'll look forward to reading more in City Limits.
All right, thank you, Gary.
Great. Sadef Ali Cully from City Limits. Thank you very much. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, it will be Michael Hinman, editor of the Riverdale Press. We'll talk a little bit about Amazon. We can talk about the public advocate race and some of the other things. I have my brand new copy of the Riverdale Press right here, and we'll talk about that right after this. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self, and I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. Let's just go right to the West Bronx and say good evening to our good friend Michael Hinman, who's the editor of the Riverdale Press. Nice to have you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me back on, Gary.
Michael, I haven't seen you as hairy as you are now. It looks pretty good on camera.
Yeah, I think it's my new lazy look. I'm not quite sure, so we'll see. We'll see how long it lasts.
So joining us now is Ernest Hemingway, but nonetheless, Michael, let's talk about Amazon. I mean, this is a fascinating thing that has happened here. That here it was, one of the biggest corporation in America, in a landmark announcement, said they were coming to New York City, and New Yorkers and politicians weren't so happy about it. And goodbye, they're not coming. What are your thoughts?
You know, this is, I think, I mean, it's out of our coverage area, but I mean, of course, we've been following it because I think it's very interesting when it comes to what's happening in the city and in terms of bringing in jobs and everything else. But I don't think that we can bring in jobs and do it at a cost. Like, I mean, I think what was the incentives for something like $1.5 billion, and there wasn't really like a clear plan on these workers that were coming in, like where they would live and everything else, and how that would affect everybody surrounding it. And I mean, especially right now, it's so tough to find affordable housing in the city. It'd be great to have higher paying jobs like what Amazon's offering. But Gary, especially in all the years I spent in Florida, where there's all kinds of incentives to attract all these different types of large businesses and everything, it's so often that these companies come in and they don't come anywhere near like the employment or anything other numbers that they promised when they were first offered.
Well, certainly in the Bronx, we we wrote the book on that. We've had empty promises on project after project. I mentioned this to Sadef Ali Cully from City Limits, who was just on the program. I think the blame falls at the feet of the mayor and the governor for cutting the deal before they told anybody about it. By the way, I think that the tab is $3 billion, not $1.5 billion.
Oh, yeah, you might be right.
But I think the blame really falls on them for cutting this deal and not including anybody in the discussion. And maybe they could have forestalled some of these issues before it got to a point where New York State and city got embarrassed.
And it's important to have our leaders like the mayor and the governor up and starting the conversations, but they shouldn't finish them at the same time without including everybody else. Because if you're sitting there and you're cutting deals without really including all of the stakeholders involved, it's no wonder that you get all this backlash that people can't seem to work through after that. And I blame them. I would be upset too if I wasn't included in in any type of that discussion, especially with my or anybody else's issues.
Maybe not in your paper because it's not quite your coverage area, but the headlines are going to read, maybe all over the country, New York turns down 25,000 jobs. Even though there are reasons why, politically, that headline is going to be quite an interesting thing for local officials to wrestle with.
Yeah, I just don't think the cost was worth it, in all honesty. In my personal opinion, I don't think the cost was worth it. It's like when
Wait, you don't think the cost of which cost do you not think was worth it?
The cost, the incentives, what it would cost us as a city to bring Amazon in. It's like bringing in the Olympics. They say, oh, the Olympics is going to do such great things for your city, when really all it does is throw your city into debt, maybe even your entire country, and you end up with all of these facilities that you're never ever going to use again.
Fascinating analogy. I really appreciate you bringing that up. Michael, let's just talk, and I know this is in your coverage area. I will be moderating a debate for public advocate. We have 10 candidates who are going to join us. For me, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, let's face it, we've moderated many debates, never with 10 candidates. What's your thought about, I guess, how the election is being conducted, the fact that there are 10 candidates? It's a very, it's strange, let's put it that way. It's never happened really before.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult because this is, I think public advocate is such an important position that gets overlooked. And right now we're doing an election that's not even a midterm election. It's not even I think I had somebody who wrote a letter to the editor here that said it was a midterm election, which means like nobody's even, I don't even think people realize there's an election coming up, and that there's all of these candidates that I think that we don't even know who most of them are, which is why I'm glad that BronxNet is doing this debate, because otherwise I don't think we would have a chance to even meet half of these candidates.
Well, you're going to meet them at 6 o'clock tomorrow. I know you're going to join us at the Lovinger Theater when we do it. The other thing that strikes me, and it'll come up tomorrow, as long as I can help it, is that it's really only a temporary election because you're going to have to re-vote for public. Now, obviously, the incumbent at that time will have an advantage, but it's not like you're really voting this person in for 4 years. It's a very strange dynamic and strange way of I don't know how else you would have handled it. Any thoughts on that? Because I want to ask one follow-up about that.
No, I mean, I think that it's important that whenever we have an opportunity to let the people speak, that we allow that to happen. I think that, especially when you get to like some of these national seats, like U.S. Senate and such, that a lot of states make it way too easy for if somebody vacates that for whatever reasons, that the governor gets to appoint or somebody else gets to appoint. Where I think it's very important that people have a chance to speak whenever whenever that opportunity should arise.
Michael, I want to just move on. Let's just talk about and by the way, for anybody who wants to know, it's at the Lovinger Theater Friday, the 15th at 6 p.m. There's free admission. You can just come in and see the program. It will be on BronxNet television. Also, by the way, on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, we'll also broadcast it. I'm just looking through the paper here right in front of me. Here's another so-called global issue. You folks wrote a story about Alessandra Biaggi talking about single-payer health care. Yes, it was well received, but not universally received. What are your thoughts about, number one, the prospects for it, and then number two, do you think people are really anxious to have this happen?
Well, I mean, it's change. I think any type of change is difficult enough to either embrace or even implement. But I mean, we're talking about, to have single payer healthcare is massive. I mean, we're talking foundational change for just about everything that we know of in terms of healthcare, and it'll definitely separate us from the rest of the country in terms of how we treat healthcare, which I think is a good thing. But one thing that Senator Biaggi had told me about at her inauguration actually last month, we talked about this real briefly, and one of the things that she did say was that that she totally supports single payer, but we have to make sure that we do it right. We can't just jump in just because, hey, look, now we have all the Democrats in control. Let's jump in and do it. We have to make sure it can be done. And there are some other obstacles in the way, including expansion of Medicare, which isn't a state issue. That's a federal issue. And I'm not sure if the government that's currently in place in Washington is going to be open to expanding Medicare to allow single payer to fully function the way it should in New York.
So that is kind of the political side of it. Our friend and colleague Michael Benjamin at the New York Post came on our program, and frankly, I haven't had a chance to really pursue the dialogue. He just kind of said it as an offhand comment. May have even said it during one of the election night forums we worked on together. That he didn't believe the economics work. That it's going to cost taxpayers a lot of money. Now, listen, I'm not an analyst, and I haven't gone through the numbers. But my feeling is each one of us pays so much, whether it be through our deductible or through our copays or through what we're paying for, for our plan to begin with, that will balance off what we might have to pay if our taxes go up. I know there was one woman quoted in the article that Simone Johnson did for your paper, and she said, look, I don't want to pay more taxes. But what if she doesn't have to pay all those other fees? Doesn't that balance out? That's the way I look at it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that obviously we don't have everybody covered in New York, so there are going to be an increase in costs, but are we talking about increase in our costs, and how much does eliminating the profit motive, do we make up in terms of what we have to pay? Because remember, when we're paying our insurance companies, no matter who they are, and not that there's anything wrong with this, but this is business, this is the way it works. But we're not just paying for medical services, we're not just paying for the overhead in order to manage that, we're also paying into profit. So there's so much profit that these insurance companies have to make, and it has to be a lot because, a lot of these insurance companies are public companies with shareholders that want to make money on their investments. So I think that by going single payer, you're at least eliminating, the profit aspect of it, and that's probably a pretty big chunk of what we're talking about in terms of expenses. And I'll be honest, I'm willing to pay, we're talking about expenses probably that might be, a few dollars more for people, but I'll tell you what, I would pay a few dollars I'm a journalist. I would pay a few dollars more to not have to worry about co-pays, deductibles, if something's covered or not covered, if I can see a doctor, because I think that I mean, for me at least, I personally feel that healthcare, isn't just is something that we just get. It's a service that we get. It should be a right.
Yeah, something you need. I'm going to give you, here's an anecdote that I heard from a neighbor actually who signed up with a managed care plan through the New York State of Health and was very happy with how that process worked and got onto one of the plans. And nobody ever informed him that the plan needed to be renewed on December 31st. And he just kept paying like every month and taking care of it. And then went to the doctor and found out he was no longer covered because on December 31st, he was supposed to renew and he never did renew it. And now he's in the process of trying to re-up his health care, and he's got a month or two without coverage. That's not good for anybody, because if he and his wife or his wife have to go to the doctor, it costs all of us because they're going to be cared for, but it's paid for by some unseen hand.
Yeah. And that's what I think a lot of people forget too, is that hospitals, a lot of the expenses that hospitals take on are expenses that people who go in to the emergency room especially and are unable to pay. And in some hospitals, I think there are some laws that allow them to do some rejections on things that aren't like actual emergencies. But in a lot of cases, these people are still treated, and they should be treated. But the thing is that somebody then has to pay for it, and we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars a year in New York alone of unpaid medical expenses that everybody else has to shoulder. So I think that this is also something that gets eliminated as well, and I think that kind of brings down a lot of the costs that we'll see in terms of healthcare.
Michael, I love having you on because we can always talk about these global issues. We got about 30 seconds. You got any real hyper-local issues? After all, the Riverdale Press is a local paper. Anything that sticks out in your mind that you want to just mention?
Well, a lot of people here are still very strong about the historic building. Well, not historic, but they want them to be historic buildings of Villa Rosa.
Bronte, right?
Yeah, and not the Charlotte, but the Brown Horde. But we're just still like sitting there half demolished, and I think that I think it's really important that the community gets together and try to protect some of these should be landmark facilities, these buildings that are very important.
Michael, I got to let you go. I will see you Friday just before the program. And thank you so much for being with us. You provide us with a tremendous amount of coverage. We appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry I'm not there with you, Gary.
All right, that's fine. You look great with the beard. It looks great.
Oh, thanks.
All right, there you go. Michael Hinman from the Riverdale Press over there in the West Bronx. So that'll do it for the Bronx Buzz. We will definitely see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock. It's going to be very exciting, the public advocate debate on BronxNet television. 6 o'clock, join us at the Lovinger Theater. You can be there and see it in person or turn on your TV. Good night.